So the second presidential Democratic primary debate was last Thursday, and I don't know if you watched it or not. I'm going to go ahead and assume you didn't, because when I look at the numbers, they say that 65% of the people who watched it were actually 55 and older. And I know that same demographic isn't on social media right now, pushing the issues, helping candidates really shape the narrative around their campaign, and honestly pushing candidates further left when it comes to the issues that we care most about in 2020. So if you didn't watch it, it's okay, because like I said before, your digital hype woman has you, okay? I'm holding you close. I'm making sure you're engaged, making sure you're informed, making sure that you're educated to go out and support and vote for candidates. God forbid, if you ever open up your wallets and actually donate to candidates, you're donating to the candidate that actually will be the Democratic nominee, then going on in 2020 to actually be the presidential candidate who's going to run this nation. Let's jump right into it. Listen, let me tell you, it was a huge misstep on behalf of NBC by not having a black woman as one of the moderators on both nights. I'm sitting here thinking, how is it possible that you don't have a black woman when you actually have Joy Reid, someone who is accessible and who works on behalf of the network and talking about the issues when it comes to black people? You know that black women turn out the vote every single time. It doesn't matter if it's a local race, a state race, or a national race. Just consider Alabama, for instance, with Democratic candidate Doug Jones actually winning the election. Black women turned out that vote. And for you to not actually have a black woman represented and asking the question to these new candidates who are running to be president of the United States was not only not hurtful, but it really felt intentional. You know, if you expect black women to turn out the vote every single time, you better make sure that we're represented in these conversations, because there's going to come a point in 2020 where black women are going to demand that our needs are met from these candidates. And if we don't have representation, you can't continue to expect us to continue to show up and show out. And please be clear, the only reason why we continue to show up is because we don't have the luxury of sitting out, okay? If we don't turn out the vote, then that means that we are going to be the most vulnerable among us. And that's not something we can participate in. Let's jump right into it. 2 words, Kamala Harris. She annihilated everybody on the stage both nights. And I know she wasn't on the stage both nights, going back and forth and debating actually all the candidates, all 20 candidates who are actually in this primary race. But oh my God, when I tell you she showed up and she showed out, that's exactly what I mean. Think about her resume. Think about the fact that she is a prosecutor by vocation. She knew what she was up against, and honestly, Vice President Joe Biden had a huge target on his back, and she knew that. If you watch the second presidential Democratic debate, you know that everybody was actually gearing up to target Joe Biden because he's polling the best out of any candidate, out of all 20 candidates actually in the race to be the Democratic presidential nominee that's going to go up against Trump. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how big the target is on Joe Biden. You know, usually the people who are the front runners in the race aren't the ones who become the nominee for the Democratic Party. And that's the same for the Republican Party as well. So one thing I know for sure is that even though Kamala Harris did exceptionally well, right? She showed up. So let's jump right into it. 2 words, Kamala Harris. She annihilated everybody on the stage both nights. And I know she wasn't on the stage both nights, going back and forth and debating actually all the candidates, all 20 candidates who are actually in this primary race. But oh my God, when I tell you she showed up and she showed out, that's exactly what I mean. Think about her resume. Think about the fact that she is a prosecutor by vocation. She knew what she was up against, and honestly, Vice President Joe Biden had a huge target on his back, and she knew that. If you watch the second presidential Democratic debate, you know that everybody was actually gearing up to target Joe Biden because he's polling the best out of any candidate, out of all 20 candidates actually in the race to be the Democratic presidential nominee that's going to go up against Trump. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how big the target is on Joe Biden. You know, usually the people who are the front runners in the race aren't the ones who become the nominee for the Democratic Party. And that's the same for the Republican Party as well. So there was one point in the night that really eclipsed everything else that happened on that debate stage on both nights, to be honest with you, where Senator Kamala Harris really went toe-to-toe with Joe Biden in challenging his voting record, right? So it's known that Joe Biden wasn't in support of busing. And at the end of the day, when we think about all the things that he's done, his record really doesn't show that he showed up for Black and brown people when it comes to the crime bill that happened in the 90s, where he was in support of it. When it comes to busing, it seems as if he was on the wrong side of history time and time again, which makes us as voters question his leadership abilities, right? And we've seen that he's kind of detracted from his statements or even his stances, prior stances, from him being this decorated politician, right? But at the end of the day, one thing that really resonated with me is that Kamala Harris really challenged that. But, and I know that this is an unpopular opinion, but at the end of the day, I'm just gonna say it. Like, not all Black women are for Black women, right? And just because you're the only Black woman in the race does not mean that Black women should support you, right? Let's look at your voting record. Let's look at how you've supported us. Because at the end of the day, and I'm just going to say this, if your record doesn't support Black and brown people, and if you're using the same tactics that white men are using, you shouldn't deserve our vote. And that's just what it boils down to. So just you being a Black woman isn't enough for us anymore. And as a Black woman voter who shows up in every single election, it doesn't matter if it's a primary election or if it's a general election or if it's local, state, or national races, I show up every single time, and I know a lot of you do as well. It's important that we support candidates with our vote who show up for us time and time again, right? I just can't simply support Kamala Harris just because she looks like me. It's important that we show up for people and vote for individuals who really share our values and who show up for us time and time again. Over the past week, we've seen that the media actually challenged Kamala Harris, and we asked her what her stance on busing is. And to be honest with you, her stance isn't really too far off from what Joe Biden said, right? She said that busing should be a tool and that it shouldn't be a mandate, right? So if you challenge Joe Biden on the stage and challenge the fact that he didn't show up for us when it came to busing, when you don't either in your policy making or even your own perspective, is problematic for me, right? But I understand that not only is she a career politician, but prior to her being elected official, she actually was a prosecutor for quite some time. So I expected her to annihilate everybody on that stage. And when she showed up, she was going to dominate, right? Like most Black women do in any space that we hold. But at the same time, too, I understand that she's doing well, not only raising money, because listen, Kamala Harris knows exactly what she's doing. She raised $2 million in 24 hours after the debate. Not only that, she was the most Google searched person after the debate, and she just dominated across the board. No one else was talking about anybody else, including Elizabeth Warren after the first debate, or Julian Castro, who raised a substantial amount of money after the debate and also was, Google searched immensely after the debate. Everybody's talking about Kamala Harris. Even Trump recently was overseas in Asia, and they asked him, what did you think about Kamala Harris's performance? Because let's be clear, that's what it is. Everybody on this stage is performing and pandering to some degree. When you are running for president of the United States, let's just keep it a buck. When you are running for president of the United States, it's important that you make yourself accessible and you appeal to the masses, right? So that's why we see candidates on the stage speaking in Spanish, and it seems like they're going above and beyond to reach out to every single community. But it takes a very special person to reach out to these communities in a way that is authentic and pure. And a lot of candidates can't do that, right? There's something about these elected officials where it feels like, regardless of what we do, we're going to be voting for somebody who's the lesser of two evils. In the last video that I shared with you all, I said that I would show my support behind Elizabeth Warren. And after this second debate, I still feel that way, where there's something about Kamala Harris that I can't quite put my finger on, that I don't necessarily support, whether it is her voting record or how she showed up and how she really demonized and villainized Black and brown people across the board. When you are tough on crime as a Democrat, you are inherently saying that you are tough on Black and brown people. And that's just something that I can't get behind, right? Okay, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about Bernie Sanders, because everybody's still talking about feeling the burn and everybody's talking about hashtag still Sanders. Let me tell you something. I was a Democratic National Committee member for Bernie Sanders, okay? In 2016, you couldn't talk to me about any other candidate but Bernie, okay? My vote was for him. All of my support was for him. You couldn't really talk to me about anything else. It took a lot for me even to support Hillary, but at the end of the day, it wasn't much you could tell me otherwise, just to be honest with you. But fast forward to 2019, when Bernie threw his hat in the ring, I'm sitting here thinking about how much has your stance changed, right? How much of your position and your platform has changed to make sure that your platform is inclusive? There's not much that Bernie can contribute to the conversation if it's not talking about holding Wall Street accountable, holding the 1% accountable. And I understand when we're talking about economic immobility that conversation is important, and we need an economic justice champion like Bernie Sanders to really drive forth the conversation that we need to have in order to establish, economic liberation or justice for most of us. And Bernie Sanders is pushing the conversation further left, and I think he's able to because he is a registered independent. He only registers as a Democrat because he wants to run for office, and because we have a two-party system, he can't run as anything else. He will not win as an independent. He could possibly, and honestly, with the last election cycle that we saw, when he was going toe-to-toe with Hillary Clinton, he raised just as much money as Hillary Clinton, who is an established Democrat, who has been in the public eye since the early 90s. For him to be able to raise just as much money as her and to be able to push forth the conversations that many Democrats can't even push for. But at the end of the day, as much as he's pushed forth the conversation and pushed Democrats further left, he's the only one talking about free college. I mean, now we see a Senator Elizabeth Warren kind of co-opting his base and co-opting his message. But at the same time, too, we are at a point now where we want to see change. And it's interesting to me because I remember when Trump first threw his hat in the ring. I remember calling my dad and we had a conversation because he's so engaged when it comes to politics. And he told me, he said, if it's one thing I know about America is that America will always vote for change. And we saw that happen with Obama, and we also saw that happen with Trump. And now I can't help but believe that we are going to see that change happen with electing the first woman president. Whether it is Kamala Harris, whether it is Elizabeth Warren, I think that America is ready for that change. And because now we see this impact, right, where women are see leadership from women in ways that we've never really seen before, which excites me. But at the same time, too, I know that America will vote for change. I'm hoping that it's the change that we need to see in order to get our country back on track and course correct in ways that we haven't seen ever before. So when you think about both nights, you see a Senator Elizabeth Warren and even a Kamala Harris, and we see them both step into this presidential light, right? For the first time ever, I see two women that could possibly be president of the United States. I don't know why, but when I saw Hillary Clinton run, it didn't feel right. It wasn't something I could actually believe in. And as someone who is an aggressive progressive, I didn't feel comfortable voting for Hillary Clinton, although I did. So I'm at a point now where I'm really challenging Senator Kamala Harris, and I'm also challenging Elizabeth Warren in ways where I want to know how they're going to show up for women, especially women of color. And I see an Elizabeth Warren really dominating that conversation, right? So this weekend we see Essence Festival, which is the largest festival happening in the country right now. And Elizabeth Warren is really showing up for Black women in a way that doesn't really feel authentic or pure in the way that Kamala Harris is really showing up, and which really baffles me because she's a woman of color. She's a Black woman. And although that might be challenged in media's eye or even with Twitter leading that conversation, we have to understand that although what we see on Twitter or in social media doesn't really affect how we turn out the vote, okay? Because at the end of the day, regardless if millennials or Gen Z are driving the conversation when it comes to the issues on social media, we're not turning out the vote. And as unfortunate as it is, if we were able to drive the conversation and push candidates further left and also turn out the vote, then we would be able to be a dominating force when it comes to turning out the vote, electing officials that we actually believe in, who share our values, and be able to have this progressive platform that we ultimately desire. And also having a future that we can believe in. Another thing we saw with the second night of the presidential debate is that there was a huge generational gap, right? Where we have candidates like Joe Biden and Senator Bernie Sanders. But then on the other hand, we have individuals like Representative from California, Eric Swalwell, and have Mayor Pete Buttigieg from South Bend, Indiana, really going to bat against this older demographic. There was one point in the night where Eric Swalwell ended up saying that former Vice President Joe Biden came to his actual district and spoke in front of the California Democratic Party and talked about passing the torch, right? And he said that it was accurate then and it was accurate now, that we need to continue to pass the torch. And as someone who's ran for office, I was the first millennial person to ever run for Board of County Commission in Charlotte, North Carolina. I understand this idea of being able to pass the torch, but when you have individuals like a Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders who's 70 plus, who's not interested in passing on the baton of power, Representative Swalwell pulled no punches. He went directly for Joe Biden. And like I told you, Joe Biden had a huge target on his back and everybody was coming for him because he's polling the best. But like I said before, those who are polling better at the early stages in the Democratic debate usually don't become the nominee. Although Bernie and Joe Biden were on opposite ends of the progressive spectrum, age was a huge factor in this debate where you have individuals like Joe Biden and Senator Bernie Sanders. There was actually one point in the debate where Senator Sanders actually jumped in to defend Senator Joe Biden, although he didn't really get his time to really step in to talk about the ageism that was discussed indirectly during the debate. It was there. You could feel it. You could see the stark difference between the younger candidates and the older candidates in the debate. And to be honest with you, I don't see anything wrong with what Representative Swalwell did, but at the same time too, we don't know you, and although you might be going against Joe Biden, it's not really going to help you in the long run. At the end of the day, Senator Kamala Harris is the one who really dominated this debate. And like I said before, when we are having these conversations about the debate, we need to talk about what the public took away from it, right? Did these candidates really share their message and their platform in a way where it really moved the base? And to be honest with you, no one did that better than Kamala Harris. And I don't know, in a lot of ways that really worries me, because at the end of the day, when we look at her policy change and reform in California and we see what she's done as a senator in Congress, it really doesn't move me as a young black woman who is engaged in politics, who cares about what happens in her community. It really worries me that she is so hard on crime, which indirectly means that she's going to be hard on black and brown people. Although Senator Harris was able to poke holes in Joe Biden's campaign and his talking points and his platform, I don't know if that's going to be enough, because she has a long way to go to really fight what Joe Biden has done. Joe Biden has had 8 years as vice president under the first black president of the United States, and that means a lot in black and brown communities. When you look on social media, there were memes that were shared for years, him being called Uncle Joe. So there's a lot of ground that Senator Kamala Harris has to make up, even being a black woman. So I'm interested in seeing what happens in the next debate that happens next month. I just keep thinking that although she is a black woman, is that enough? Is that enough for her to be able to then sway the vote and have the black women who do show up for the vote time and time again come out and vote for her just because we look like her? For Senator Joe Biden, it's not enough for you to just have close proximity to the first black president of the United States. We need to know how you're going to be able to lead this country after a Trump presidency, and what you're actually going to do to unite the country again. Aside from Senator Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and Swalwell, Kirsten Gillibrand had a moment where she really defended women's rights, especially women's reproductive rights. Honestly, it really moved me because outside of this debate, there's nothing that Kirsten Gillibrand that really said that really made me pay attention to her campaign or her as a candidate or even as an elected official. But the fact that she really spoke to the American people and said that I want to talk to American women and let you know that I'm fighting for you, and that when the doors are closed and when they're making these deals in Congress, that she's going to be the one that fights for women's rights and reproductive rights, really spoke to me. And it was something that really caught my attention and really resonated with me. And I know that it resonated with a lot of women as well. So I'm interested in seeing what she does for the rest of her campaign and how the American people really receive her and her message. Other than that, all you need to know is that Kamala Harris is coming for Joe Biden. Obviously, everybody's coming for Joe Biden. He's had some struggles at the beginning of this campaign, but at the end of the day, it's going to take a lot to move black and brown people from not supporting Joe Biden because simply he was the vice president, first black president of the United States. I'm interested in seeing how Kamala Harris is able to combat that. But furthermore, I want to see what the rest of the candidates do, including Senator Bernie Sanders, how he continues to talk about universal health care and he talks about free college. Like, he is literally pushing the dial forward. And I'm excited about the presidential candidates this term. I'm excited about how much the conversation has been more progressive over the last 4 years. And I really think there's an opportunity for us to really fight and combat Trump in 2020. I think we have a fighting chance. And I think that one of these candidates will rise to the top and be able to fight Trump and actually win back America. Because at the end of the day, we do need decency. We do need structure. We do need somebody who's going to be able to connect with the American people in a way that's very basic and simple, you know? That's one thing that Trump really dominates on. He doesn't care about being politically correct. He doesn't care about policy making or reform or law making for that regard. He does what he wants. Listen, Trump is a reality television superstar. He does not care about the American people. He cares about ratings. He cares about how many people show up to his rallies. And at the end of the day, we don't care about any of that. We want to know how we're going to be able to put food on our tables, how young people are going to be able to buy houses and start families and be able to go out and actually have a savings and have a life that they're willing to live and not have to struggle to make ends meet. At the end of the day, our values don't align. We are concerned about, especially young people are concerned about making sure that we can make ends meet and we can actually start a life, right? Having a family and putting food on the table and being able to buy a house or even just make ends meet. We're not even able to do that. And if these presidential candidates can't talk about that, then they're really going to miss out on young people turning out the vote, right? If you can't connect with us, then why should we vote for you? What are you doing to really speak to the issues that we care about and we value? You know, in the news we hear a lot about a recession is coming and, you know, people aren't hiring as much as they want to, and that, you know, AI is a big issue now because it's displacing individuals within different industries, and those are the things we care about. What are we going to do 5-10 years down the line when we're going back to school to be educated and we're keeping up our end of the bargain, but time and time again, we're let down, right? There aren't any jobs to meet us where we are. We're not able to start our lives. We're not able to even think about a future because we're literally just trying to make ends meet. Not only are we disillusioned about being engaged and being informed and being a part of the political process, we're just trying to keep food on our tables and to keep the lights on, quite literally. So if these elected officials can't really speak to that, or these candidates who are running for president of the United States can't speak to those issues, then I don't really think that young people are going to turn out the vote. So the key takeaways that I have from the second presidential Democratic primary debate is that Kamala Harris is a force and Joe Biden should be worried about her coming up in the ranks and being able to not only do better than him in the polls, but potentially really sewing up this primary election and her being the Democratic presidential nominee. I think Joe probably jumped in the race thinking that he is the establishment candidate, and the fact that he has the most name recognition and he might be the one to raise the most money. However, I don't think he was aware of how fierce Kamala Harris is and how bad she actually wants this. And he also should be worried about a Julian Castro or Elizabeth Warren. But to be honest with you, I think of both nights, Kamala Harris really dominated, and she is the one to watch. If she actually is the Democratic nominee, I would not be surprised, and I think she is the one to actually go toe-to-toe with President Trump. However, at the same time, we constantly have this conversation of the lesser of two evils, and I have this conversation with so many individuals where it's kind of like, why should I have or choose or vote for individuals who I don't believe in, who don't share my values? But at the end of the day, I would vote for a Kamala Harris or Elizabeth Warren over a Trump any day of the week, just because although they might not be as progressive as I want them to be, or show up for Black women as much as I want them to, they are hand over fist way better than Trump and progressive in ways that we need them to show up and hopefully be able to course correct this country and getting back to our American values and really showing up for the most vulnerable among us. So the next presidential Democratic debate is actually July 30th and 31st, and I'm interested in who's going to drop out of the race, who drops in polling, who isn't able to fundraise, and just to be honest with you, who is annihilated by the media. Right now, I see Senator Kamala Harris and former Vice President Joe Biden really dominating the force, but then you see a Julian Castro and Elizabeth Warren really rising in the ranks, and I really don't think that Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders were really ready for Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris. I really think that it could potentially be two women at the top of the ticket. However, is America ready for that? I like to believe so. Despite all the hatred we see with hate crimes and a lot of the conversation we saw with the Hillary campaign in 2016 arise, I really think this is an opportunity for us as Americans to see what we're about and who we could potentially be in 2020. I'm excited at the idea of two women being on the ticket, really showing this country that we can unify and we could really disengage from this conversation that Trump is really leading. I want to believe in the best of us. I know that America doesn't have a great history or a track record of really being progressive. However, this is a time we can do it now, where we can right those wrongs and we can course correct in ways that we haven't before, and I'm excited about that. And I am an eternal optimist, and I really believe in this country, and I think that the only way to win it is if we're in it, and we can't allow people to make decisions on our behalf. So we have to continue to show up and be engaged and be informed. And like the last video I did, with this video, you can be a little bit more engaged and more informed about doing research about certain candidates you believe in. If nothing else, I hope this video gives you an opportunity to do more research and really have a better understanding of the candidates who are in this race and who you support, not only on a national level, but up and down the ticket, including local and state races as well. I'm excited about it, guys, and I hope you are too. The next video I actually am going to do is more so about understanding political jargon. I want you guys to, reach out to me. Let me know if you are receiving these videos and if you are engaged in ways that help you. I'm excited about it, and I hope I speak to you soon. Peace, y'all.